Okay, so we will start. Okay, today we'll look at London system. Okay, the approach that we will follow is we'll try to understand the openings. Then, in that particular opening, we have to try and understand the middle game patterns. Okay, strategies. Then we have to look at the end games that typically arise from such openings. Okay, that is the way to go about studying chess. Okay, so you will start with you will have to pick up somewhere. Okay, the other approach is to randomly learn some endings, randomly learn some middle games that will give you a broad idea. But when you are preparing, you have to prepare in a focused manner. Okay, so London system in today's session, we'll look at the opening ideas. Okay, London system for me it will take 10 to 12 sessions to completely cover this. Okay, and London system is one of the easiest for white to learn. One of the easiest to learn, one of the easiest to put into practice. Okay. So in today's session, I will start with different move orders against different opening setups that black will have. Okay. Black players will play so many different things against the London. Okay. They might play the main line. Okay. They can play c5. Okay. They can also play something like a Queen's Indian defense. They can play King's Indian setup. They can play. Correct. So they can play a Grunfeld setup. Okay. Some other offbeat opening also they can. But with London system, you will have a standard idea against all of these, but you will have to be careful with the move orders. Okay, ba. So today we will try and cover the opening ideas. Then in subsequent classes, we'll go deep into specific lines. Okay. So today we'll broadly touch upon the different opening setups that are there. Okay. So firstly, I will show you the critical line with the London system. White will start with pawn to d4. Most common move in reply is pawn to d5. d5 or knight f6 is the most common reply from the black side. Okay, pawn to d5. Now what is the move for London? Bishop f. Bishop f4. So bishop f4 is the preferred move order if you are trying to play the London system. Okay. What else can you do? You can also play knight f3 and then you can play bishop f4. Okay, delaying bishop f4, but if you have some particular reason why you want to delay that, then you can play knight f3. But in general, you can directly play bishop. Okay. So I'll show you if you are a London player, okay, and you start with knight f3, I'll show you some lines where it might be a little bit uncomfortable for white. Okay. Nothing wrong with this. This is a perfectly fine. Correct. Correct. You will end up playing passively. You may not be able to get time to develop your other knight. Okay, you can delay knight f3. Knight f3 doesn't do much right in the opening, but there are some problems with b2. Okay, pawn on b2. Okay, so I'll try to show you one line. So let's say black continues with knight f6. Okay, now you play bishop f4. This was your plan. They play c5. In response to c5, if you are playing the London, you will play e3 or c3. Okay, depending on your preference, but e3 is the most common move. See, the idea in London will be to get the triangle pawn formation with pawns on b2, c3, d4, e3, f2. Okay, Sometimes people will play c3 followed by e3. Sometimes they will play e3 followed by c3. Okay. So e3. Black continues with knight c6. Okay. Pressurizing on d4. Okay. So now they have a pawn on c5 and the knight on c6. Next, what will they do? They will play queen d6. Okay. So now let's say white continues with their London system's thematic approach. Okay. They play c3. Now when they play queen to b6, d4 is attacked and b2 is attacked. Okay. So you will play, what will white normally play in this position? Knight to d2. Knight to d2, you can ignore the threat, and if they take the pawn, you can say that is a poisoned pawn. But in this line, maybe you are not trapping the queen. Okay. Queen b3 is the common. Queen b3 is the most common move. Absolutely. So, and white is happy if black takes the queen. If black takes the queen, white will recapture with the a pawn. They have a semi-open file for the rook, and later on they will push the b pawn. They will get rid of the double rooks. Okay. But black is saying the same thing. Okay, black will play c4. So black says, I will not capture your queen, you capture my queen. Okay, then I will recapture with my a pawn. I will have the file for the. Okay, so they'll play c4. You will play queen c2. Queen c2, continuing to defend b2. Okay, now what does black play in this position? g6. Yeah, but for g6 you had some idea, right? What was the idea? To put the bishop on g7. Okay, but the idea is to play the move bishop to f5. Okay, so black is saying you can take my bishop, and what will black do? Queen takes on b2, trapping the rook. Okay, so this is a standard opening line in London system. When you start with knight f3, this position has been reached many times. Okay, here white will have to passively play queen c1, and that position is not great. Okay, they'll have to play queen c1. So this is the idea. Now black is having a slightly better position. Okay, now I will show you slight variation in this. Okay, we'll go all the way back. And instead of knight to f3, white starts with bishop f4 first, delaying knight f3. Okay, black continues with the same idea, knight f6. What will white do? But I'm delaying knight f3 with some reason. Okay, so I'm playing e3. Okay, okay, e3. So black continues with c5, the same plan as before. Okay, c5. What will white do? White goes for the triangular pawn formation, c3. Now, knight c6, continuing with the same pattern. Okay, knight c6, putting pressure on d4. Here, white plays the move knight to d2. Yes, you have not committed your knight on f3, but you have moved the other knight. Okay, knight to d2. Now they play queen b6. Okay, white replies with queen b3. What does black play here? Pawn to c4. Here queen c2. Now what is the difference? If they play the move bishop f5, you can simply capture the bishop. If they try to take the pawn, the knight is no longer there on b1. You will play queen b1. Okay. So this is the point of delaying knight f3 in this variation. But in many variations, it is favorable for white to start with bishop f4 if they are playing the London. But knight f3 is a flexible move. With knight f3, they need not get into London. They can get into some other opening. They can play c4. Okay. But if they have decided to play London, then bishop f4 is a good start. Okay, so in this position, after queen c2, the standard move is to play g6 with the idea of bishop g7. Yes, you can actually castle on the queen side, but it is not safe to castle. Yes, they will find the address of the king very early in the game, so that they will start attacking. Instantly, they will start attacking on the queen side. Okay, so castling preferably you will do on the king side, where black does not have a lot of space. Okay, so if g6, what is the idea of g6? One of the ideas here is to put the bishop on f5. Okay, here white has a move. White has a good move. And this is also possible because you have not yet developed the knight to f3. That will lose the queen. Okay, I don't want to. You should not give random moves. Okay, give some logical moves. Logical moves. Yes, they'll have to prepare e5, but we will blockade it. Okay, usually we'll blockade it with the knight. We'll put the knight on e5 and we'll blockade that. Yeah, but here there is a move for white. Here you can go on to e4. Okay, the point is e4 is sufficiently protected and c4 is also weak. So if they play pawn takes, you can go bishop takes on c4. Okay, and you also have the option of knight takes on e4. Okay, so undermining the center. Okay, so this is called as the critical line in the London system. Okay, so this is the one that you will most commonly face if you are playing the London. This is one of the most common lines. Okay, so now I'll go to the previous move. This is roughly the setup that white wants to get in terms of the pawn structure and the placement of the bishop. Okay. Also in London system, what white wants to do is preferably put the light square bishop on d3 or e2. They'll put the knight on f3, hoping that someday the knight will go to e5. Okay, and they will do another thing. They will push the pawn to h3, giving a square for the bishop to retreat. Okay, so that is the thematic structure of the London system. Okay, now I will show you a variation. This is called as the main line. Okay, so the game starts normally d4, d5, bishop f. Okay, so far so good. So knight f6, you play the move pawn to e3, and your opponent reacts with pawn to e6. This is the main line. Okay, pawn to e6. They want to first develop that dark square bishop. Okay, so they will play pawn to e6. In this position, you can play knight f3 because they have not gone for an early c5. Now they can play c5, but they are one move behind. Okay, compared to before. Because they played e6 now, you have the time. Play knight f3. Okay. This is the main line. But okay, I'll show you one variation. If you are still worried about the b2 pawn, okay, you can delay knight f3 here also. You can here also you can delay. You will continue with knight to d2. You continue with knight to d2. Let's say they play now from now onwards. Let's say they start. They play c5. Okay. Then you will play which move? c3. That is typical. c3. Now they go knight c6. You will develop the bishop to d3. Okay. You are intentionally delaying knight f3. Okay. Now they play something like bishop to d6. Here white has some options. Okay. g3. Typically, you will retreat to g3. So I will show you many lines where you normally retreat. But there is a method which is called as the stone wall attack for black. You capture the bishop, and after queen takes, you play the move on to f4. It weakens the e3. Okay, e4 is a weakness also. e4 is a hole. Okay, but this setup is called as the stone wall attack. This is not something that I am recommending, but you need to know. Okay, the same setup can be done by black also. Black will play pawn to f5. They'll have a pawn on e6. Okay, so the same setup will be done by black also. You would have heard the Dutch defense where they play the stone wall Dutch. Stone wall Dutch. They'll play. They'll start with f5. Then they will have pawn to e6. Then they will play pawn to d4. Okay, that pawn formation, inverted triangle. Okay, so that is called as the stone wall. Okay, but we will not get into the stone wall. I am just showing you this line. But there is one thing you should know. We'll go back here. You want to delay. You want to delay knight f3. So I told you to start with knight b2 d2, right? You can start with bishop d3 also. But in some lines, this will get into trouble. Okay. Let's say they play c5. You can capture, but that will only help blacks. They will recapture with their bishop, developing with time. Okay. You will lose your structure also. Okay. So what will white do? White will play c3. Now Black can play queen to b6, early queen to b6. They have not played knight c6, but they are straight away playing queen to b6. Okay, this makes it a little uncomfortable for white. Correct. If you play queen b3, c4 is a forcing move. You have to take the queen and they will get the open file. Okay, then you have to waste time retreating your bishop. Okay, so because of this early queen b6 idea, it is better to avoid bishop to d3. Bishop to d3 is committing the position of the bishop too early. They can play a timely c4. Okay, so that is the idea there. So after e6, the standard move is knight f3. Okay, so now we will continue from here. c5. If they play c5, we'll reply with c3. Okay, and if they don't play c5, instead if they play bishop to d6, the standard move is to retreat to g3. What is the idea? Yes, only if that happens, only if bishop takes g3 and pawn takes g3 happens, white should try to castle on the queen side. Okay, so that you can maintain the attack on the king side. So bishop retreats. The other option is if they don't play bishop to d6, okay, and they play bishop to e7. They are not challenging your bishop. Yes, but if you play normally, what they are trying to do is they are trying to they are trying to they did this move, okay, because they want to trade their f6 knight for your bishop. Okay, so they will play knight to h5, knight to h5. Then the bishop doesn't have any great squares. You will have to end up trading it for that knight, which you will try to avoid. So what will you play? h3. Simply play h3 so that you can retreat the bishop. But you will not play h3 if they played bishop to d6. Okay, only if they play bishop to e7. You can ignore the threat. They will, you get a strong center, you get two pawns protecting e5. That is also a line. Okay, you can ignore it, let them take. That is also possible. It's played sometimes. Okay, now going back to the standard book. Before developing the dark square bishop, they firstly play c5. You reply with c3. Now the normal continuation. Okay, knight to c6. You will play knight b d2. Now they play the move bishop to d6. Still, you will play bishop g3. Okay. Now black castles and white plays the move bishop to d3. So this setup, now the opening is done. Okay, this setup is the main line. White will have to wait to see whether bishop trade happens on g3 or not. Hmm. Sorry. See, white should in general avoid castling queenside. Okay, because the moment you castle queenside, they can go for c4, b5. Okay, the attack starts. And if you have to castle, okay, then before that you will have to either trade off that bishop, or if you don't want to trade off that bishop, you will plan knight to e5 so that You can then bolster that knight with your pawn to f4. Yes. So at that stage, you will reach the stone wall structure. That is fine. But your knight will be too powerful there. After you put the knight over there, then they cannot trade your bishop. Okay. Then you will support the knight with the pawn. No, the king will castle. The king will castle on the king side, but not too early. If the bishop is being threatened on g3, then you should not castle. Okay, you have to wait for the position to clarify. Once you play knight to e5, then you are free to raise. Yes. So in this position for white, which is the better bishop, which is considered in general as per chess principles, the the dark square bishop or light square bishop? The light square bishop is considered as the better one in this position because this bishop works in tandem with the pawn structure. The pawns are all on dark squares. They are controlling dark squares. The bishop is controlling the light squares. Okay, so they complement. They complement each other. So light square bishop is better. So at some stage, if you feel like you have to trade the dark square bishop, it is fine. Okay. Okay, now let's see if what happens if black goes for another setup. They go for the King's Indian defense. King's Indian players, they normally like to fianchetto the bishop and play in a modern way. Okay, they will not initially challenge the center, but later on they will start to attack on the king center. Yes, London will transpose into many different openings. Yes, yes. You can change. You can get Slav. You can get Dutch. Okay, it will transpose, but you are having a setup which is playable against most of the blacks defenses, which is why it is one of the easiest to start. Okay, but you will have to learn some other openings also. Okay, but I'll show you now against King's Indian setup what you can do. In King's Indian setup, d4, what will black do? They'll play knight f6. They don't want to commit anything in the center. You will continue with the move bishop f4. Now what will they do? They'll play g6. Okay, you will continue with your plan. Pawn to e3, bishop to g7. Okay, you play knight to f3. They simply castle. Okay, so you continue. You play bishop to light square bishop to e2 in this position. Okay, so this is a pattern which you will try to remember. Okay, you can play c4 and transpose to a different opening. Okay, you can play c4 and but that is sometimes what the black player wants when they are playing King's Indian defense. They are well prepared against d4 c4. Typically, they don't face that many London when they are playing. Black player is well prepared when they are playing King's Indian defense. King's Indian is one of the sharpest openings. Okay, with black. So black player is well prepared against d4c. You might be better off to continue in the London setup. But here, why bishop to e2 instead of the standard bishop to d3? Okay, normally black does not fianchetto the bishop in the other systems in London. Here, if you put the bishop on d3, one is you are just facing the pawn chain, black's pawn chain. g6 is blockading your bishop's view. Okay, bishop is not really targeting itself. Bishop on e2 supports which idea? Bishop on e2 supports h4 h5 idea, h4 h5 break. Okay, you have a battery with the queen and the rook. If the rook remains on the h5, you might go for an early h4 h5. Okay, so bishop supports that. So you will almost always play the bishop on e2 instead of d3. But with bishop on d3, there is another minor problem also. It will get into some kind of a trouble when black starts to push his central pawns. Okay, because the f3 square is occupied by your knight and d3 square will be occupied by your bishop. They can try to fork you on e4. Okay, they will try to do some pawn to e5 followed by e4 in future when the time comes. Okay, right now they cannot do, but that will happen in many games. That will happen. Okay, after bishop to e2, King's Indian defense players, they will continue with the move pawn to d6. Okay, pawn to d6. This is their typical setup. So they will try to do a few things. Okay, they will try to bring the knight b d7. Okay, followed by pawn to c6. They'll try to put the queen on c7 and they'll try to play e5. Okay, right. They'll try to get e5. And at that stage, if you have the bishop on f4 and you also have the bishop on d3 and knight on f3, after your bishop moves from f4, they can go for e4. Okay, but this is the normal setup. Okay, after d3. Now, what should white play? White can ask the player to roam. Okay, but there is one preparatory move. They will try to play h3 first. h3 first. Again, the same knight h5. Knight h5 plan. Okay, if knight h5, they want a square to retreat. Also, preventing the bishop. Okay, bishop g4 pin. Okay, yeah, you can say that. Okay, but I want to show you one thing. Yeah. Hmm. H4, H5, so H3 is slow. H3 is slow, that is true. But in when your opponent is playing King's Indian, okay, they are not doing anything in the center. There is no contact in the center yet. Okay, there is no conflict over there. So the center is not likely to open up right now. So you can afford to play slow. Okay, but if there is a lot of tension in the center, then you cannot play slow. You get what I'm saying, right? If there is tension in the center, you will have to be very mindful of the time. But there is no tension in the center, you have the time to play H3. But that is a good point. Okay, but I'll show you just one maneuver. If you, let's say you don't play H3, okay, you simply castle. Okay, now if knight, yeah, correct. So if knight H5, bishop will go to G5 so that the knight cannot capture. Okay, so this is a common maneuver that you will find in these positions. Bishop will go to G5, they will play pawn to H6, kicking the bishop, you will retreat the bishop, they will play pawn to G5. Yes, they are attacking the bishop, but this is somewhat weakening on the king side for black. But this is also played. Now, how will white respond? But the whole point of this maneuver was white did not want to give the bishop away for the knight. So they can still try to keep that bishop if they want. Sacrificing the knight works in many positions in this opening, but it doesn't work here. Because after knight takes, pawn recaptures, you will play bishop takes knight, then the other pawn will recapture your dark square bishop. But sacrificing the knight works when the king is still in the center. If the black king is still in the center, okay, at that in that maybe we'll see some other lines where it works. Okay, here you just play the quiet move, knight f2 d2. Now the f6 knight is, sorry, the h5 knight is done. So it is better for the black player to now just retreat the knight to f6. No, what I'm saying is, in this position, they have two choices. They can say, I'll play pawn takes the bishop. Okay, that weakens the king too much. So the other option is to play knight to f6, so that Hmm. Correct. After you retreat the bishop to g3, you have some attacking ideas. You can start with f4. You're right. Okay. So this will be the, after this move, knight to f6 will be the best option. But sometimes in some games, black has tried the move knight to f4. Okay. This can happen if the black player has done a lot of preparation in this line. Otherwise, they will not play this. Okay. If they play this move, it means they have probably prepared this line very deeply, where if you capture the knight with the pawn, they will capture the bishop with the pawn. Okay. And if you retreat the bishop to g3, they want to capture the bishop on e2. Knight takes on e2. Okay. But after you capture the knight, pawn takes on f4 and they play pawn takes on h4. Black's king is too exposed. Okay. So that will be the best continuation for white. You just capture the knight, they will capture the bishop and you have a better strategy. Okay. This is if you don't play the move h3, giving your bishop an escape square. Okay. But if you played the move h3 instead of castles, if you just play the move h3, then you can avoid this entire sequence. So it depends which move order you prefer. Okay. Both are playable. After h3, black continues with c5. You will play c3. Okay. Now they will play the move pawn to b6. They want to develop the light square bishop. Now you can castle. After they develop the bishop, you can complete your structure. See how you arrived at the same structure in the end, just using different move orders. Okay. The same structure that you normally play with the London system. But you will come to that structure via different move orders depending on the system your opponent is playing. Whether they're playing the main line, they are playing some other line. In this case, they are playing the King's Indian set. Okay. So they will continue with knight b2 d7, completing the opening. Okay. So from here, the game continues. Typically, white plays the move pawn to a4 here. Okay, just slowing down black's expansion on the queen side. In the long term here, what white wants to do is try and prepare e4. Okay, they also want to get a king side attack. Okay, they might try to play. They'll try to play knight g5, pawn h4, h5, and try and get a king side attack. Okay, so this is the King's Indian setup. Very similar to that, you have the Grunfeld setup. Okay, in Grunfeld, black starts similar to King's India, but they go for the move d5 instead of d6. Okay, so d4, knight f6, bishop f4, g6. You play the standard opening move, pawn to e3. They play bishop to g7, and after knight f3, they will castle. Okay, then you play bishop to e2 again because of the fianchetto structure there. Instead of d3, you go for e2. Now they play the move pawn to d5. Okay, so this is the Grunfeld setup. There is a slight difference in the move order here because there was a pawn earlier on d6. Okay, you did not have the e5 square for your bishop. So you had to play pawn to h3. You need not play pawn to h3. You'll try to trade it for the dark square bishop. You will put the bishop because they have played pawn to d5 instead of d6. Okay, so the e5 square is available for your bishop. And if they really don't want to trade the bishop, then they will play f6, which is not a good move. Okay, you're following, right? So the e5 square is now available. So you can directly cast. Okay, so half your development is done. Now they try to play, let's say, c5. You will respond with, but in London system, what do you do? c3. Whenever it is c5, you try to reply with c3. Your opponent will have a nice diagonal for his bishop. Okay, sometimes that knight will move, give a discovered attack on b2. Yes, you can go for that approach. Yes, okay. But we try to avoid capturing there and play pawn to c3 because we want to have a solid London setup. Okay, so then what happens? They'll play knight to c6. You will play, you can play knight b to d2. Okay, here h3. Why? Because now the e5 square is covered by the knight. So you have to keep watching that. So now you play h3 so that you have a square for your bishop. But it's not required. You can, if you're okay to trade the bishop, that is fine. You can just play knight b to d2, knight b to d2, and you will enter into that sequence which I told you. Let's say now knight h5, bishop g5, right? But this is not recommended because here what will happen after h6, bishop h4, g5, you will have to, there is no knight to d2. You will have to go back to e1. This is too passive. So it is better to avoid. Okay. Now black has the move. C takes on d4. Okay. If you capture the knight, they can very well capture the bishop, but they can play an intermediate move. Okay. So that they'll be attacking your knight and they'll be attacking the bishop also. You will have to respond. Okay. So that is why this is not recommended. So in this position, then white will have to recapture. Let's say they go c takes d4. Then the same idea, knight to f. Okay. So weakening your structure, but this position is slightly passive for white. The white knights are not very happy. Okay. So you can try to continue, but they will trade the f6 knight for your light square bishop, which was the better bishop in your camp. Yes, queen will recapture, but the point is you lost your good bishop for that f6 knight. Okay. So instead of all these, let's play h3. Now they play queen to b6, thematic move, queen to b3 and c4. Queen c2, bishop f5. Here the bishop is protected by g6 pawn. Okay. No, but queen c1 will, when you can, there is a better move over here. There is a better. You'll play queen to a3. See, the point is, earlier the dark square bishop used to be on the a3 diagonal. Now there is no way to harass the queen. Now what is the queen doing? It's preparing the move pawn to b3. So pawn b3 push undermines c4. Black cannot hold the pawn on c4 because the black queen is in the way of the b pawn. Okay, so queen a3 is a good move. It comes in this position where you are not able to go queen c2. Exactly. There is no bishop in that diagonal. Queen a3. Okay, so this is a slight nuance in the Grunfeld setup. Okay, so from here the game will continue. They will develop the light square bishop. You will play knight b2 d2 and then push for b3. Okay, you can play pawn to b3 or you can prepare with a rook on b1 and then play pawn to b3. Okay, now we'll see what happens in the Queen's Indian set. In Queen's Indian, what is black trying to do? They are just trying to fiancé of the queen side bishop. Okay, so you start with d4. They play knight f6. And you play bishop f4. They continue with the move pawn to e6. So if they play pawn to e6, typically what is the idea? c5 is an idea. The plan for the bishops, okay, so the dark square bishop is developed along this diagonal. They want to put the light square bishop on b7. So they don't want to play the pawn to d5. Okay, because then it will block the light square bishop. Okay, so you continue with your plan. You play pawn to e3, then they play b6. This is the Queen's Indian defense setup. Okay, so you will continue with the move knight to f3, and they play bishop to b7. So this was their plan. Here, where you can put, where do you develop the light square bishop? d3, right? Because now you are eyeing h7. There is no pawn on g6. Correct. Okay, now bishop to d3. Okay, so they develop. They play bishop e7. What will you play? You'll play h3. The moment they play bishop to e7, they are eyeing knight h5. Then you don't have bishop g5. No, you don't have because queen and bishop are battering. Okay, if you go bishop g5, they will take. Yes, bishop e5 is there, but they can play. They anyways want to play pawn to d6. They have not played pawn to d5 yet. So after they play pawn to d5, you can assume that you have the e5 square. They have not committed d5 yet, right? So you play h3. So you see the pattern, right? Whenever they play bishop e7, they are ready to jump with the knight. Okay, then you play h3. Okay, so they castle. You can also castle. Now they go for c5. They don't want to go for d5, they go for c5. c3. Standard move. Now they play on to d6. What will you do? Knight bd2. You got the exact same setup with white against Queen's Indian defense, right? There might be very slight differences, but pretty much get the same setup. Okay, this is the flexibility of the London system. You will be able to play it if you know the London system, if you know the move orders. Okay, you can play it against any setup and you can trouble your opponents. Because in this pawn structure, you will be more prepared, right? Yes. But for them, from your opponent's perspective, okay, if you see, they are not playing that many London games. If you are a London player, you would have played more games in the London system. Okay. So you will know the thematic ideas. You will know, how to attack on the king side. What is the idea with the expansion on the king side? What is the typical queen maneuvers? So I will take you through that when we discuss the middle games. There are some thematic ideas which you can implement regardless of the system that your opponents are choosing. Okay. Fine. So they play knight b2 d7, completing the development. Here you can go for the move queen to e2, trying to play e4. Okay, going for e4 idea. So in this, the idea will be you'll play, you'll try to play bishop h2 whenever required, because the moment you play e4, the bishop becomes undefended. Okay, so you'll have to plan for that. Whenever there is an undefended piece, there might be some tactic. Okay, so just having that idea. So you will want to play e4, you will want to play bishop to h2, then you can go for a king side expansion. Okay. Bye. Quick. Okay. And if black is going for a queen side expansion, what move did I tell you? How to slow it down? A4. You will play A4 if black is trying for a queen side expansion. You should not allow that. Okay. If you are completely quiet, no, we should play. Hmm. Oh, they'll prepare. They'll play A6, B5. Okay. Then they cannot make progress. If they directly play A5, A4, then they cannot make progress. So they'll have to prepare A6, B5. So slowly only they can. So they'll play A6, B5, C4. Then they'll play A4. Okay, so that is their idea over there, to try and expand on the queen side. Okay, so this is the Queen's Indian setups. Queen's Indian setup. So we have seen a few setups. There are a few more setups. We saw 5 setups, correct? But there is one interesting thing with the Dutch. Okay, in Dutch, when they play Dutch, there are 4 setups in Dutch itself. Okay, then against London, they can play Dutch. The moment you play D4, they'll play F5. Okay, Dutch players are adamant about playing Dutch. Okay, so they will go for Dutch. In Dutch, you have different setups. You have the Stonewall Dutch, you have the Leningrad Dutch. Okay, so they will play their setups. So against that, we'll see that in the next class. Now I think time is up. Okay, so we saw 5 setups. In Dutch, there are 4 more setups. Then we have to see Slav. Okay, in Slav, there are a couple of setups. Slav occurs in Queen's Gambit. Slav occurs here also. Here also. The Slav occurs, and there are some lines where exchange variation of Caro-Kann will also appear. Exchange variation of Caro-Kann in the London system, it will appear. There are some move orders, there are some transpositions which happen. So there was a game played by Magnus, okay, where he was playing the London system. This was in an Olympiad. So he played the London system, which transposed into exchange Caro-Kann. Okay, so those are some setups that are still there. We'll see those setups in the next. They play knight f3 because they want, with knight f3 you have some flexibility. You need not get into London. Okay, you have the option of playing c4 and getting into some other opening. Okay, fine. So there are a few more setups. After that, the opening will get completed. Then we can get into the middle. Okay, so we'll continue. We'll have the class next Saturday. Yeah, next Saturday it will be online because I'm traveling. We'll share the link with you. You guys join online. Then once I'm back, we'll do. என்னம்மா பரவாயில்லப்பா போயிட்டு வாங்க முடிஞ்சா அட்டன் பண்ணலாம் ஓகே பாய்